Welcome back. Now, political leaders, climate experts, and advocates across the world are currently in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh attending the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, popularly known as COP27. They're deliberating on how to make progress on zero-emission targets set in previous conferences, improving and moving away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy, climate financing, among others. Now, things are really heating up at the summit as expected. Developing nations are making a very strong case for payments for, quote, loss and damage of the effects of climate change from developed nations now, who they accuse of being the sole reason for the situation. But then the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, on his part, is advocating bankable projects to help African countries access climate adaptation finance. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom, alongside other developed countries, have now pledged monies for the adaptation and especially prioritized Africa as the major benefactor. But again, these are just pledges. Previous funding pledges are yet to be met or redeemed, if you like. So it's difficult to tell if this would be any different at all. Let's discuss this further now. Sulaiman Arigbabu is the Executive Secretary of HEDA Resource Center. He joins us from the venue of COP27 in Egypt. HEDA, by the way, stands for Human Environmental Development Agenda. I also have Desmond Majekodumi, who is an environmentalist and a passionate climate change advocate. He joins us from the Nigerian commercial city of Lagos. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me start with you, Sulaiman, in Egypt. Bring us up to speed now with what exactly is happening at that conference.
Okay, thank you, DEJI, and greetings to our viewers. So right now, the negotiation is starting to get pretty serious because that will be going on now till the end of the COP, but probably even if it enters into an extension. An agenda has been agreed before by Saturday, and by Sunday, the COP started officially. There have been negotiations on the terms, there are consultation sessions. That sits on the part of the official events at the COP. However, on the part of other learning opportunities, learning events, bilaterals are also going on. I wish to quickly raise an issue, though,
Yes.
which is not part of the formal conversations, but which is a growing concern, amongst observers and civil society, and that is the condition present at the current city where this COP is being held. This has turned out to be the most prohibitive, the most expensive experience, for people attending the COP. The cost of living here is extremely high. And yes, of course, Sharm el-Sheikh is a tourist city. So one expects, a measure of things being more expensive than other parts of Egypt. However, there is a marked increase in the cost of hotels and feeding and stuff from previous months to now. So unfortunately, it appears that the government of Egypt did not pay attention to this, because the implication of this is that many COP attendees who were initially built to stay for 2 weeks have had to leave. This means that the space for civil society in participation is being closed up. This means that the space for African countries who might not be able to have large delegations is being closed up. So you are finding a situation where people who are here on official business, people who are here as observers, are having to cut short their trip, restricting it to just the first week. Yet, the main negotiations, really, the high-level negotiations really takes place in the second week. So this is worrisome, and we need to state this because the next COP is happening in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, and that's a much more expensive city.
Yeah, I guess the Egyptian government is trying to make as much money as it can from this. I mean, when you consider what the Egyptian economy is going through, then maybe this would make some economic sense. But let's just leave that aside now. Mr. Majekodumi, you've been following the debates at COP27. we're beginning to see a familiar line, if you like, this line of the developing world now accusing the developed world of not doing enough in terms of adaptation and mitigation, financing, especially here in Africa. President Buhari, for instance, put out an opinion piece in the Washington Post where, for instance, he said, look, way back in 2009, the developed world pledged about $100 billion to support adaptation programs or projects in Africa. But as we speak today, those pledges have not been redeemed. And now we're having new pledges. So clearly, it appears African leaders are frustrated with the fact that the developed world are not meeting their pledges now as far as funding climate projects now in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just a symptom of the overall problem that brought humanity here in the first place. Brother Suleiman is indicating another small aspect of it. We have to commercialize. People are coming to our city, make pledges, a whole lot of blah, 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 blah. And whilst under different kind of circumstances, this is acceptable. But when you have a situation that has been referred to by the Secretary General of the United Nations as we're inside a vacuum heading straight towards climate hell, and we still have our foot on the accelerator, or his previous statement, mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal because nature always fights back. And we're still having these blah, blah, and all these pledges. It's a symptom of the overall problem, which is actually, we humans. In this case, bringing across the climate change. Obviously, it's the Western industrialized world that is more guilty of having done that. But it's a problem that goes across humanity, that you don't have enough care and compassion for each other. You don't have enough love in your heart for your brethren, that you will continue to pursue relentlessly this situation that, according to Al Gore, turns the atmosphere into just one big sewer. How can you turn the atmosphere of planet Earth, the only planet that we know of amongst the millions of planets that can actually support life, okay? And the main reason why it can support life is because of the way that the atmosphere has been so meticulously and scientifically.
Sorry to interject, sir. But let me ask you, in your opinion, do you think the West, who, as you have pointed out, the guilty party here, especially when you consider our carbon footprints now, you consider the emissions now, and you're quite right. The West is just the guilty party here. The developed world, let me just put it that way, because we also have China there in between and then Japan. So, but do you think they're doing enough to help Africa deal with the consequences of climate change?
They're not doing enough at all. And part of the problem is that, and I've had it from direct information, that, hey, if we even bring the money out and we give it to one of these African governments, where will the money end up? with mansions in Dubai and houses here and there, the amount of corruption that's going on in so many of the African governments, as we know, it's not a hidden thing. We know, so there's also that challenge. And that's why the NGOs like Suleiman's NGO, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, and other good NGOs are trying to create a strategy whereby they shall be monitoring bodies, so there will be no excuse. No, the West is not doing enough. They haven't done enough. They've known for decades that, putting all these millions and millions of tons of these toxic gases into the atmosphere. Look, this is a divine, it's a turning point for humanity. If we continue this way, do you know how many? Can you imagine 1 billion refugees? Yeah. And that's only in about 10, 15 years old. And in another 20, 30 years, it becomes unstoppable. The process has gone too far for too long. and we have to change our attitudes. And this is basically what nature is saying. And I'm hoping that at least the nations will come together and ensure that we get what's necessary from the so-called developed nations.
Well, Sulaiman, now listening to the Secretary General of the United Nations, it would appear he basically said what Mr. Maja Kodumi has actually alluded to in terms of corruption now, that look, when they bring the money, where would it go to? So when you hear the UN Secretary General, for instance, say there are no bankable projects in Africa, no bankable adaptation projects to fund, what does that tell you?
That's the line that we should not even talk about. You see, when we talk about climate justice, the reality is that the world is not serious, like Mr. Desmond have said. The world is not serious to deal with the issues of climate change. And the good thing about climate change is that it's no respecter of class, it's no respecter of boundaries. So we're all in this sinking boat together. Either we deal with it or we perish with it. And when the likes of Mr. Ban Ki-moon says that there are no bankable project, I'm sorry, Mr.
Guterres, yes.
The current Secretary General, Guterres, when he says that, I believe that he's saying that in the context of financing that comes through investment. And of course, investors will not just push their finances into anything. They want to see that, okay, this has a good chances of success. But that is not the only climate finance we're talking about. Like President Buhari was alluding to the $100 billion fund that was supposed to have gone over a decade,
yes.
Which has not really seen much. Less than 15% of that has been paid. So we are talking about climate debt. Those countries, they are next one countries who have followed this path to development and gotten all of us into this problem, have obligation, because that's part of the core of the conversation here in setting agenda for this negotiation. What are we talking about? We're looking at grant-based funding, or we are looking at investment-based funding. We know that grant-based funding will not be enough for the kind of money required, for instance, for energy, just energy transition for Africa. But we are saying that before the investment-based funding comes, the grant-based funding should not be. We should not turn the other way on those, because it's critical. And beyond that, there is something very important that Africa needs to push, which is not yet on the table for conversation. Most of the money that Africa has that should develop Africa resides by hook or crook in many of the developed countries. And we need to bring the monies that Africa lose through illicit financial flow, the monies that Africa lose through unfair trade, the monies that Africa has trapped in terms of looted monies that should immediately return to Africa. If you are not sure what the countries will do with it, we have the African Development Bank. Let this money first return to the continent. Let it start to help the continent, and then let the grant-based finances also come. And then the investment will find the climate, the conducive environment, the conducive climate to be able to come. Then the concern of the likes of Mr. Guterres about not having bankable projects in Africa, or not having the right environment to absorb the volume of investment that have to come, this will no longer be the case, because the money that should make the environment conducive to receive bigger funds would have already been created. So this is at the crux of the matter, and Africa can no longer be held back by this kind of rhetoric. If there are no bankable projects, write the bankable projects and make them come to Africa. It's important because, for instance, it's talking now about loss and damage. For some communities, we are all aware it is beyond redemption. It's already too late for them. The world is clamoring for a 1.5 degree, and whereas at 1.2 degrees is already late for some communities, some in Africa and some in other parts of the world. So it appears that there is no seriousness to commitment. There's no seriousness for the developed countries, especially post-COVID. And we know that they have their own challenges too. But climate change is not something that is as critical as the COVID crisis, if not more, because it's a crisis.
Okay, let's Okay, let's just take a short break now. We'll come back to continue this conversation. When we come back, I want us to talk about the energy transition plan now of Africa and how you think Africa can actually fund some of these ambitious plans like that of Nigeria. Stay with us, don't go away, we'll be right back.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
The new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching DEJI360 and we're discussing the ongoing COP27 in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. And of course, I have Sulaiman Arigbabu, who is the Executive Secretary of HEDA, and Desmond Maje-Kodumi, an environmentalist with me. Let me come to you, Mr. Maje-Kodumi. As we speak today, the West has set for itself an ambitious target, if you like, for instance, the European Commission says by 2030, it wants to reduce greenhouse gas emission now by about 55%. And as we speak, most of the developed countries are talking about phasing out diesel-powered engines now, or petrol-driven cars by 2030 altogether, and some maybe later. And then you have in Africa where gas, for instance, we have it in abundance. Take Nigeria, for instance. Nigeria has come out with an energy transition plan that it says will cost about $410 billion or so, and it's seeking funding for that, and it plans to continue with gas now as a transition fuel between now and 2060, when it hopes to achieve the zero emission target. Now, you look at the transition plan of Nigeria and some other African countries. How achievable are they? I mean, take for instance that of Nigeria. You look at the huge amount of money the country would need to deliver on that transition plan. Do you think it's achievable?
Well, my brother Suleiman has actually hit the bullseye of the target, because if money is designated to the African Development Bank, which happens to be headed by a man of impeccable integrity, tried, proven, and tested, who understands the gravity of the problem. Again, we have to remind ourselves that this is the defining problem of humanity. It is the biggest problem humanity has ever faced. And we faced a lot of problems before, but this is it. We allow this thing to go much higher. When I'm talking about this thing, I'm talking about the temperature that Suleiman referred to. We've already taken the temperature of the Earth to 1.2 above average. If it goes to 1.5, we're already unleashing unstoppable processes. And it looks as if it's going to go beyond 1.5. So transition must be done. And, whilst our gas resource is fantastic, and this dash for gas by the Western nations, now that they're having issues because of the problems, they're still having wars and fighting themselves and all this kind of rubbish, which nature is telling humanity, basically, forget it, you human beings, if you can't evolve into the kind of harmonious creatures you need to be, then you shall be shifted aside. COVID was just a little a little tap on the head, and look what happened. The whole world shut down for almost a year, and there's a lot worse that can come and will come if we don't change. So yes, transition is, you see, again, we in Africa, we're blessed. We have almost 400 times more energy potential from our weather, from the sun, from the wind, from thermal energy, from wave energy, 400 times more potential from that energy source than we do from the fossil fuels anyway. And the problem with the gas, whilst it looks to be a good transition fuel, because when you burn it, it doesn't give off that much greenhouse gas. But if it leaks, methane is far more virulent a greenhouse gas than CO2. So it has to be handled very, very responsibly. We can't do it if the money is allocated to the right place, which one of the best places, African Development Bank.
And Sulaiman, let me get your view on that now. You look at our energy transition plan. Not all of Africa now. I mean, not every country in Africa has come up with some kind of robust energy transition plan, but that of Nigeria is quite robust and quite rich. But the question is, how achievable, how feasible is it, especially when it comes to funding? I mean, we're talking about a situation where the developed world have not been able to redeem the pledges they made in the past, and now we're making new demands of them.
Okay, I'll take it from where you end. We are really not making new demands of them. We are actually asking for what is pragmatic and what is critical. Really, it's quite unfortunate that where we are finding ourselves. I am a firm believer in multilateral conversations, in multilateral negotiations. However, I must say that these negotiations have been taking place under very unfair and unequal terms. Between Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh, the narratives are changing so fast. And why is that? Like Uncle Desmond said, because of the crisis in Ukraine. So it means that Africans could have been left to, were debating whether gas should be an energy plan or not. But now the narrative is changed because Europe has felt a little bit of what Africans have lived with as a reality forever. So the dynamics will have to change. Now you have countries like Namibia who are saying our newfound hydrocarbon base is not going to be left to international negotiations. We are going for it. Senegal have said the same thing. Kenya have said the same thing. So, and then you are having less resistance from Europe because they need Africa to augment the energy crisis that they are having with Russia. So it shows that we are just there to be used, our raw materials to be taken, and the planet to be messed up. And it's quite unfortunate. In terms of whether our energy plan is achievable, indeed it is achievable. And I tell you what, I reiterate what I've said earlier. The first thing that needs to happen is that illicit financial flow out of Nigeria needs to stop. Nigeria loses about $18 billion to illicit financial flow. It has to stop. Our money is stranded in the West, taken there by collusion of our compatriots and their foreign allies, needs to return to the continent. When that happens, it will open the space. It will fertilize the soil for new investments to come and aid us. And if the West also realize that invest in an economy like Nigeria is one, is an obligation. Two, it is what is pragmatic, and that it has prospects, of returns. It has good prospects. The investors will want to come. But certain things need to be put in place for the investors to come. It's not just because President Buhari is making a tweet, but because Nigeria is launching our energy plan.
We're running out of time, Sulaiman. Very quickly now, what do you think Africa will get from this summit that is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh?
I am not really hopeful for much. Even in terms of loss and damage, the Paris Agreement has locked the hands of Africa because it's saying that you need to do justification, you need to show proof, and that is going to be difficult to get much out of it. But at least the best that Africa can get out of this is to get the rest of the world to agree that Africa has special needs and has special circumstances that needs to be respected, and for which funding, financing, and technology transfer needs to come to the continent to help us out of this critical situation. But in terms of what is going to come out of this COP, we're already moderating the expectations, unfortunately.
And that's really quite unfortunate. Let me just wrap up with Mr. Majekodunmi. Now, other than what we expect from the West, we on the continent, what do you think we on our own too can actually do to help ourselves, to mitigate this disaster? You look at Nigeria today, a substantial part of the country is underfloored, is underwater. And you have the same situation in other parts of Africa. I mean, the other day I saw a picture of a whole city in Niger underwater. So it's really serious. But on our part, other than waiting for the West, what exactly do you think we should begin to do?
Well, the most important thing we have to understand, we are our brother's keepers. That's what scripture is all about. And that gives me a lot of hope, because at least we do believe in our scriptures. We're good Christians, we're good Muslims, we're very faithful people. And the scripture tells us, love the creator. And the creator says, care for the creation, love your neighbor, don't damage your neighbor's life support system. We're brothers in Africa, care for ourselves. And the practical thing, reforest, plant hundreds of millions of trees, protect the forests that are there already. That's nature's wonderful system of balancing the whole atmospheric gas, and stop the pollution. For God's sake, stop the pollution. It's deadly. It's killing people, and we can't continue this way. Be your brother's keeper. Love your God Almighty.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming on the program and for speaking so passionately about this issue. Unfortunately, it appears most of us are actually not taking climate issues very seriously, but then we're living with the impact of climate change on a daily basis, not just in this country, but across the continent and across the world. And unfortunately, Africa is actually at the receiving end of this. Well, we'll wait and see. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Sulaiman Arugbabu, we wish you all the best in Egypt, and let's just hope the Egyptian authorities will do something about the cost of living in that country, especially in the city of Sharm el-Sheikh, because actually I can understand how difficult it can be when you go for a conference like that and you are not able to do what you should do, or you don't spend the time you should spend to engage in debates and take part in all the sessions and all of that. So let's just hope something is done about that. Desmond Majekodunmi, thank you very much, as always. Thank you so very much for coming on the program. All right, I'm afraid that's how much we can take on the show this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.